My ex-fiancée drained our $50 wedding fund for a spiritual guru who promised her perfect love, so I investigated and what I uncovered left them begging to disappear. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. The animation studio felt different now. Quieter. Bill Jenkins bounced a stress ball off the wall behind my desk, the steady rhythm matching my mouse clicks as I rendered another frame of the children's show that paid my bills. Still can't believe she cleaned out the entire wedding account, Bill said. Catching the ball, $50,000 for some guru's spiritual awakening intensive. I paused the rendering. Olivia Marlowe thought she was investing in our future. The Celestial Light Foundation convinced her that only by releasing earthly attachments, meaning our relationship, could she find her true soulmate. The memory still stung. 3 days before our wedding, Olivia had stood in our kitchen wearing that vacant smile she'd developed after joining the foundation 6 months earlier. Noah, Marcus Divine has shown me that you're not my authentic twin flame. I need to release you to find my real spiritual partner. $50,000 of our wedding savings had already vanished into the foundation's account. Her explanation: Marcus says financial sacrifice proves spiritual commitment. Olivia had always been searching. Yoga retreats, meditation workshops, crystal healing sessions. I'd supported it all because her spiritual curiosity was part of what I loved about her. She was open, trusting, eager to grow. The Celestial Light Foundation seemed different from her usual weekend workshops. They offered a 12-month soul transformation program, led by Marcus Divine, a charismatic man in his 40s who claimed to have achieved divine consciousness and could guide others to their authentic soul purpose. Look at their testimonials, Olivia had said, showing me the foundation's glossy website. Video after video of beautiful people describing life-changing breakthroughs, perfect relationships found after releasing false connections, and financial abundance flowing after surrendering material attachments. Marcus conducted weekly group sessions at a converted warehouse in the Arts District. I'd driven Olivia to her first meeting. Waited in the parking lot. She emerged 3 hours later with eyes that seemed brighter, talking rapidly about energy alignments and soul contracts. Within a month, she was attending 3 sessions per week. Within 2, she'd signed up for private consultations at $200 each. By month 3, Marcus was suggesting she might need to examine whether our current relationship aligned with her highest spiritual path. I'd tried to talk to her about it, gently at first, then with growing concern as she became distant, secretive about her foundation activities, she'd stopped discussing wedding plans, claiming they felt spiritually inauthentic. When I suggested we postpone the wedding to work on our relationship, she'd accused me of being threatened by her spiritual growth. The final blow came when I discovered she'd liquidated our joint wedding savings money we'd both contributed to equally without discussing it with me. The foundation needed an emergency donation for their expansion to help more souls find their purpose. 3 days later, she left me for what she called her spiritual path. I should have let it go. Olivia was an adult who's made her choice, but something about the foundation nagged at me. Maybe it was watching someone I'd loved become a stranger. Maybe it was the calculated way they'd isolated her from friends and family. Or maybe it was simple anger at losing $50,000 to what felt like an elaborate con. I started with the obvious authority, the state's Consumer Protection Agency. Mr. Whitaker, the caseworker, said during our phone call, religious and spiritual organizations have broad protections under the First Amendment. Unless you can prove fraud, meaning deliberate deception for financial gain, there's nothing we can do about voluntary donations to a registered nonprofit. But they manipulated her into leaving our relationship and giving them our money. Spiritual counseling that results in relationship changes isn't illegal. People have the right to make choices about their personal lives, even choices others might consider unwise. The agency's position was clear. Olivia had freely chosen to donate money to an organization that provided spiritual services. No laws had been broken. The fact that I disapproved of their methods was irrelevant. I hung up feeling like I'd been dismissed as a bitter ex-boyfriend who couldn't accept his fiancée's spiritual awakening. Bill had insisted I needed to get out, meet new people. Sitting at home analyzing cult recruitment tactics isn't healthy. Man, the coffee shop he'd dragged me to was crowded with the usual mix of freelancers and students. I was scrolling through more foundation testimonials on my laptop when someone slid into the seat across from me. Sorry, is the seat taken? Everywhere else is full. Ruby Caldwell was exactly the kind of woman I'd normally be too intimidated to approach. Financial analyst at a major firm, runner's build, intelligent eyes that seemed to catalog everything. She'd glanced at my screen and frowned. The Celestial Light Foundation? My sister almost got sucked into that place. For the next hour, Ruby told me about her younger sister Miranda's near miss with the foundation. Miranda had attended several sessions before Ruby intervened with some hard financial realities about the group's donation structure. I ran the numbers, Ruby said, pulling out her phone to show me a spreadsheet. The average member contributes between $15,000 and $25,000 in their first year. The organization has roughly 300 active members, but their reported expenses don't match their obvious income. She'd researched the foundation's tax filings, business registrations, and property holdings. Marcus Divine lives in a $2 million house. The foundation owns 3 luxury vehicles. Their spiritual retreat center is actually a vacation rental that generates income when not being used for workshops. Ruby's analytical mind had seen patterns I'd missed. The foundation wasn't just taking advantage of spiritual seekers, they were running a sophisticated business model designed to extract maximum money from vulnerable people. The worst part, she continued, is how they target people going through transitions, new divorces, job losses, deaths in the family. They prey on people who are searching for meaning. That evening, I called Ruby to thank her for the information. We talked for 2 hours about everything except the foundation. By the end of the call, I'd asked her to dinner. Armed with Ruby's financial research, I tried a different approach. I contacted 3 former foundation members whose stories I'd found online, people who'd eventually left and spoken publicly about their experiences. Sarah Jen had been in the foundation for 18 months before her family staged an intervention. I gave them $32,000. She told me during our coffee meeting, Marcus convinced me that my resistance to donating more money was a spiritual blockage, preventing my evolution. David Rodriguez had left after discovering that Marcus was sleeping with multiple female members while preaching about sacred partnerships. The whole twin flame thing is just a way to justify breaking up existing relationships so people become more financially dependent on the group. Jennifer Walsh had worked as the foundation's accountant before her conscience forced her to quit. Marcus takes about 40% of all donations as administrative costs. The rest goes into property investments that he personally benefits from. I documented their stories. compiled Ruby's financial analysis, and created a comprehensive report showing the foundation's questionable practices. Then I contacted the local news stations with the package. Channel 7's investigative reporter Monica Freeman seemed interested initially. She interviewed Sarah and David, reviewed the financial documents. I thought we'd found the breakthrough that would expose the foundation's manipulation tactics. The story never aired. A week later, Monica called me back. I'm sorry, Noah. Legal says we can't run the piece. Everything the foundation does technically falls within the law. The donations are voluntary, the spiritual services are protected religious expression, and the relationship counseling that breaks up couples isn't illegal, but they're systematically manipulating people. Proving manipulation versus legitimate spiritual guidance is nearly impossible in court, and frankly, the station doesn't want to deal with First Amendment lawsuits from a religious organization. The media couldn't help because the foundation had structured their operations carefully to stay within legal boundaries while maximizing profit and control. Ruby and I had been dating for a month. She'd moved beyond helping with research to becoming genuinely invested in exposing the foundation's practices. Her sister Miranda had maintained contact with current members, providing insider information about the group's activities. Marcus is planning something big, Miranda reported during one of our strategy sessions. He's talking about a transformation intensive that will cost members $5,000 each. It's supposed to guarantee that participants find their twin flame within 6 months. Ruby's eyes narrowed. That's fraud if he can't deliver what he's promising. We'd learned that the foundation operated through carefully constructed ambiguity. Marcus never guaranteed specific outcomes. He promised spiritual growth and alignment with authentic purpose. When relationships ended or financial abundance didn't materialize, it was always because the member hadn't committed fully enough to the process. I decided to investigate from the inside. Creating a fake identity took more work than I'd expected. I became Derek Mason, a recently divorced graphic designer who'd lost his job and was searching for deeper meaning in life. Ruby helped me craft a backstory that would appeal to the foundation's recruitment preferences: financially stable enough to make substantial donations, emotionally vulnerable enough to be influenced, and socially isolated enough to become dependent on the group. My first foundation meeting was held in the same warehouse where Olivia had started her journey. About 40 people sat in a circle of folding chairs, while Marcus Devine held court from a slightly elevated platform. He was exactly what I'd expected: attractive in an aging rock star way, commanding voice, intense eye contact that made everyone feel personally chosen. The universe has brought each of you here tonight because you're ready to release the illusions that have kept you trapped in inauthentic living. Marcus began, but releasing those illusions requires courage. It requires sacrifice. It requires trust in the process, even when your ego mind tells you to resist. For the next 2 hours, he wove together psychology, spirituality, and manipulation so seamlessly that I found myself almost believing him, despite knowing it was a performance. He spoke directly to people's pain points: loneliness, financial stress, relationship problems, and offered the foundation as the solution to everything. The genius was in his specificity. Marcus didn't make vague promises about finding happiness. He talked about members who'd found their perfect partner after leaving incompatible relationships, who'd discovered financial abundance after releasing attachments to money, who'd healed family trauma after cutting contact with toxic relatives. During the break, I was approached by 3 different members who wanted to share their transformation stories. Each conversation felt scripted, like they'd been coached on how to recruit newcomers. They spoke about their lives before the foundation in terms of darkness and confusion, and their current lives as filled with purpose and joy. When the session ended, Marcus personally greeted every new visitor. His handshake lingered. His eyes searched mine as if seeing into my soul. Derek, I sense you've been through significant loss recently. The universe doesn't bring people to me by accident. You're here because you're ready for something greater than what you've been accepting. He invited me to a private consultation the following week. $200 for an hour of personalized spiritual guidance. I accepted. During my private session with Marcus, I played Derek perfectly. I talked about my recent divorce, my job loss, my sense that life must have deeper meaning than the material success I'd been pursuing. Marcus listened with the focused attention that made people feel uniquely understood. Derek, you're describing the exact pattern I see in people who are being prepared for major spiritual evolution. The universe has stripped away your false attachments so you can discover your authentic path. He outlined a personalized transformation program that would help me release limiting beliefs, align with my soul purpose, and attract my twin flame. The program required monthly group sessions, weekly private consultations, and participation in special intensives throughout the year. The financial commitment was substantial: $800 per month for the first 6 months, increasing to $1,200 per month as I progressed to advanced levels of the work. I know the investment seems significant, Marcus said, but consider what you've already spent on therapies and approaches that haven't created lasting change. This work is the foundation for everything else in your life. I told him I needed time to consider the commitment. Marcus' demeanor shifted slightly, still warm, but with an undertone of urgency. Derek, I have to be honest with you. The people who succeed in this work are the ones who trust the guidance they receive and act on it quickly. The mind will always create reasons to avoid transformation. If you wait too long, you might miss this window of opportunity. I left the session with Marcus's words echoing in my head and a clear understanding of how the foundation hooked new members. They created artificial urgency, framed hesitation as spiritual resistance, and made the decision to join feel like the most important choice a person could make. That evening, I tried to contact Jennifer Walsh, the former foundation accountant who'd spoken to me earlier. Her phone number was disconnected. When I reached out through social media, she responded with a curt message: I can't talk about the foundation anymore. Please don't contact me again. Sarah Chen and David Rodriguez had similarly gone silent. When I finally reached Sarah, she was nervous, paranoid. Noah, someone from the foundation contacted my employer. They suggested I might have substance abuse problems that affected my reliability. It wasn't true, but it created problems for me at work. I can't afford to be connected to any investigation of them. The foundation had effectively silenced the witnesses who'd been willing to speak about their experiences. They'd used legal intimidation, professional sabotage, and personal harassment to ensure that former members wouldn't cooperate with any exposure efforts. Without witnesses willing to go on record, no media outlet would touch the story. Ruby's financial investigation had become increasingly sophisticated. She'd traced the foundation's money through multiple business entities, property holdings, and personal accounts, connected to Marcus and his inner circle. "Look at this," she said, spreading documents across my dining table. "The foundation doesn't just take donations, they're loaning money to members for their program fees, then charging interest rates that would make payday lenders blush." She'd discovered that members who couldn't afford the full program costs upfront were offered spiritual investment opportunities, loans from the foundation at 24% annual interest. Members signed promissory notes that made them personally liable for the debt, even if they left the program. Miranda told me about a woman who borrowed $15,000 for the Advanced Transformation Program. When she tried to leave 6 months later, the foundation demanded immediate payment of the full balance plus accrued interest. She had to file bankruptcy. Ruby had also identified a pattern in the foundation's property acquisitions. Every 6 months, they purchased new real estate using a combination of member donations and commercial loans. Marcus's personal residence was technically owned by the foundation, allowing him to live there tax-free while the organization claimed it as a business expense. "This isn't just spiritual manipulation," Ruby concluded. "It's financial fraud disguised as religious practice." But proving fraud required evidence of deliberate deception. Everything the foundation did was carefully structured to maintain plausible deniability. Marcus never explicitly promised specific outcomes, never claimed to guarantee results, never made statements that could be definitively proven false. I'd been attending foundation meetings for a month. Playing Derek Mason perfectly, Marcus had accepted my explanation that I needed to start with monthly sessions before committing to the full program. Other members treated me as a potential success story, sharing their experiences and encouraging my participation. The deeper I went into the foundation's culture, the more I understood their sophistication. They didn't just take people's money, they systematically restructured their entire social and emotional lives around the organization. Members were encouraged to distance themselves from friends and family who didn't support their spiritual growth. They were taught to view criticism of the foundation as evidence of others' spiritual limitations. They were told that leading the program would result in spiritual regression and the loss of all progress they'd made. During one group session, I watched Marcus work on a woman named Patricia who was expressing doubts about continuing the program. He didn't argue with her concerns. Instead, he reframed them as evidence of her spiritual breakthrough. "Patricia, the resistance you're feeling is actually your ego's last desperate attempt to keep you trapped in limitation. The fact that you're questioning the work means you're on the verge of a major transformation. This is exactly when people either break through to their next level or allow fear to pull them back into old patterns." By the end of the session, Patricia was apologizing for her doubts and committing to the advanced program. Ruby and I developed a plan to document the foundation's manipulation techniques and financial irregularities from the inside. She would attend sessions as Derek's girlfriend, creating an opportunity to record conversations and observe recruitment tactics. I would advance deeper into the organization's hierarchy, accessing information available only to committed members. The risk was significant. If we were discovered, the foundation would use their legal resources to destroy us professionally and personally. But we'd reached the point where exposure was the only way to protect future victims. Our infiltration plan lasted exactly 3 weeks before everything fell apart. Ruby had been attending sessions as Derek's supportive girlfriend, documenting Marcus' manipulation techniques, and recording conversations with members about their financial commitments. I'd advanced to the intermediate transformation level, which provided access to additional workshops and deeper financial exploitation. During an advanced session on releasing money blocks, Marcus had each participant write down their annual income, savings balance, and monthly expenses on index cards. He collected the cards, claiming he needed to understand each person's financial energy patterns to provide appropriate guidance. I'd provided fake financial information for Derek, but I'd photographed several other cards before Marcus collected them. The foundation was systematically cataloging members' financial resources to optimize their donation extraction strategies. Ruby and I thought we'd found the smoking gun that would expose the foundation's predatory practices. We were wrong. Marcus appeared at my apartment on a Thursday evening, accompanied by 2 men I'd never seen before. He smiled with the same warm confidence he displayed during foundation sessions. "Hello, Noah. I think it's time we had an honest conversation." My blood turned ice cold. Derek Mason's carefully constructed identity had been compromised. "I'm sorry, I think you have me confused with someone else." Noah Whitaker, age 32, animator, former fiancé of Olivia Marlowe, your girlfriend Ruby Caldwell. Financial analyst, sister of Miranda Caldwell, who attended several foundation sessions last year. Marcus walked into my living room without invitation, his companions positioning themselves by the door. "You've been investigating our organization for 5 months. You've interviewed former members, analyzed our financial records, and infiltrated our sessions under false pretenses." He produced a folder containing surveillance photos of Ruby and me meeting with Sarah Chen, entering the foundation building, researching property records at the county courthouse. They'd been watching us for weeks. "Here's what's going to happen," Marcus continued. "You're going to end your investigation immediately. You're going to delete all the recordings, documents, and research you've compiled. And you're going to sign an agreement stating that you attempted to infiltrate a religious organization for the purpose of harassment and defamation." He handed me a legal document that would essentially destroy my credibility if I ever tried to expose the foundation again. By signing it, I'd be admitting to conducting an illegal investigation motivated by personal vengeance against my ex-fiancée's spiritual beliefs. If you refuse to sign, we'll be forced to pursue legal action against you for stalking, harassment, invasion of privacy, and attempted fraud. We have documentation of your fake identity, recordings of your false statements to our members, and evidence of your girlfriend's industrial espionage against our organization. The legal threats were probably exaggerated, but the foundation had resources I couldn't match. They could tie me up in court for years, bankrupt me with legal fees, and destroy my professional reputation, regardless of whether their claims had merit. Ruby arrived as Marcus was finishing his presentation. Her face went pale when she saw him in our living room. "Ruby, your sister Miranda has been feeding you information about our organization. If you continue this harassment campaign, we'll be forced to take legal action against her as well for violating confidentiality agreements she signed as a former participant." The trap was perfect. By threatening Miranda, they'd found Ruby's pressure point. By threatening both of us with legal destruction, they'd neutralized our investigation. Marcus left the legal agreement on my coffee table. You have 48 hours to consider your options. Choose wisely. After they left, Ruby and I sat in stunned silence. 5 months of work, dozens of hours of research, weeks of dangerous infiltration, all of it had been anticipated and countered by an organization that had clearly dealt with investigators before. We have to sign, Ruby said finally. I can't let them destroy Miranda over this. I wanted to fight, to find another way, to refuse their ultimatum. But Marcus was right about one thing: they had more resources and legal protection than we could overcome. The next morning, I signed the agreement. Signing Marcus' agreement felt like complete defeat. Ruby and I had deleted our research files, abandoned our investigation, and committed to leaving the Foundation alone. Derek Mason disappeared forever, and I resumed my regular life as Noah Whitaker, unsuccessful cult investigator. But Marcus made one crucial error: he was too confident in his victory. 2 weeks after our confrontation, Olivia appeared at my door. She looked terrible, thin, exhausted, with the hollow-eyed appearance of someone who'd been systematically drained. Noah, I need to tell you something about the Foundation. She'd finally seen through Marcus's manipulation, after he'd convinced her to take out a $20,000 loan against her car to fund the Twin Flame Intensive program. The Intensive was supposed to guarantee that participants would meet their spiritual soulmate within 30 days. He paired me with a man named Richard, who's been in the Foundation for 3 years. Marcus said we were twin flames who needed to explore a spiritual partnership. But Richard told me he'd been paired with 4 different women over the past 2 years as their twin flame. He said Marcus rotates the partnerships to keep people dependent on the program. Olivia had discovered that the Foundation's twin flame matching was completely fabricated. Marcus paired members based on their psychological vulnerabilities and financial resources, not spiritual compatibility. The romantic relationships that formed were designed to increase members' emotional investment in the organization. Noah, I gave them everything: our wedding money, my savings, my grandmother's jewelry. I thought I was investing in spiritual growth, but I was just paying for the privilege of being manipulated. She wanted to expose the Foundation, but she needed help. As a current member who'd been financially devastated by her involvement, she had credibility that I'd lacked as an angry ex-boyfriend. There's something else, she continued. Marcus is planning to move the organization to Costa Rica next month. He's telling members it's for a spiritual retreat center, but Richard thinks he's actually relocating to avoid legal problems. If we're going to stop him, it has to be now. The irony was perfect. Marcus' overconfidence in controlling the narrative had led him to continue manipulating Olivia even after neutralizing our investigation. By pushing her too far too fast, he'd created the inside witness we'd never been able to find. Ruby, Olivia, and I spent 2 weeks planning our final approach. This time, we wouldn't rely on media attention or legal authorities who couldn't or wouldn't act. Instead, we'd focus on what Ruby's research had taught us: the Foundation was vulnerable to financial scrutiny because their business model depended on maintaining their nonprofit status. Olivia still had access to Foundation facilities and trusted relationships with other members. She could document the organization's practices from inside while providing cover for our investigation. Ruby's financial expertise would focus on gathering evidence of tax fraud and business registration violations. I would coordinate the effort and handle the technical aspects of documentation. The plan was elegantly simple: expose the Foundation's financial irregularities to the Internal Revenue Service and state regulatory authorities who had the power to revoke their nonprofit status and investigate their business practices. Olivia attended the final Twin Flame Intensive, documenting Marcus's promises and the matching process that paired members based on financial potential rather than spiritual compatibility. She recorded sessions where Marcus explicitly told members that their donations would be tax-deductible religious contributions, then used the money for personal real estate investments. Ruby identified discrepancies between the Foundation's reported activities and their actual expenditures. They claimed to spend 80% of donations on spiritual services and education, but their documented expenses showed that most money went to Marcus's personal lifestyle and property acquisitions. I compiled everything into a comprehensive report that showed the Foundation's systematic violation of nonprofit regulations, tax fraud, and deceptive business practices. The breakthrough came when Olivia discovered Marcus's travel itinerary for the Costa Rica relocation. He wasn't planning a spiritual retreat, he was establishing residence in a non-extradition country before authorities could investigate the Foundation's finances. The timeline suggested he knew legal problems were imminent. We submitted our evidence package to the ERS, the State Attorney General's office, and the Secretary of State's Business Regulation Division simultaneously. Unlike media outlets or consumer protection agencies, these authorities had the power to investigate financial fraud, regardless of religious protections. The response was swift and decisive. The ERS initiated an immediate audit of the Foundation's tax-exempt status. State investigators froze the organization's assets pending investigation of business registration fraud. The Attorney General's office opened a criminal investigation into wire fraud and racketeering charges. Marcus' planned escape to Costa Rica was blocked when federal investigators placed him on a no-travel list. The Foundation's bank accounts were frozen, preventing further victim exploitation. Within 2 weeks, the entire organization collapsed. Local media finally covered the story once criminal charges were filed. The investigation I'd been unable to get published 6 months earlier was now front-page news because it came with the backing of federal authorities and criminal indictments. Sarah Chen, David Rodriguez, and Jennifer Walsh emerged from hiding to provide testimony once they knew the Foundation could no longer retaliate against them. Dozens of other former members came forward with similar stories of financial exploitation and psychological manipulation. The final tally was staggering: over 800 victims across 5 years, with total financial losses exceeding $4 million. Marcus was charged with wire fraud, money laundering, and racketeering. The Foundation's assets were seized to provide partial restitution to victims. Marcus Devine was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. The Foundation's properties were sold, providing partial restitution to victims who'd lost their life savings to the organization. Olivia recovered about 30% of the money she'd donated, enough to restart her life without the crushing debt Marcus had encouraged her to accumulate. The criminal investigation uncovered evidence that the Foundation had been operating similar scams in 3 other states under different names. Federal prosecutors used our research as the foundation for a broader investigation that ultimately shut down an entire network of spiritual fraud operations. Ruby and I had been dating for 6 months when the foundation collapsed. Watching her methodically dismantle their financial structure with spreadsheets and regulatory knowledge had been more impressive than any romantic gesture. She approached problems with the same analytical precision she brought to everything else, and her commitment to protecting vulnerable people matched my own protective instincts. You know what's interesting? Ruby said one evening as we reviewed news coverage of Marcus' sentencing. We didn't actually break any new investigative ground. Everything we found was available through public records and insider testimony. The problem was that nobody with authority wanted to look. She was right. The foundation had operated openly for years because they'd correctly calculated that religious protections would shield them from scrutiny. They'd only been stopped when their greed exceeded their caution. The real victory isn't putting Marcus in prison, I realized. It's that 800 people learned to recognize manipulation tactics, and thousands more heard their stories. Olivia and I never reconciled romantically. But we'd rebuilt a friendship based on shared experience rather than romantic history. She'd returned to her marketing career with a deeper understanding of how persuasion techniques could be used to exploit, rather than inform. I want to help other people recognize the warning signs I missed. She told me during one of our coffee meetings, the foundation didn't recruit me because I was stupid or weak. They recruited me because I was searching for meaning and willing to trust people who seemed to offer it. She'd started volunteering with a cult recovery organization, helping former members rebuild their lives after leaving high-control groups. Her experience with Marcus' manipulation techniques made her uniquely qualified to help others recognize similar patterns. Ruby and I had moved in together after 6 months of dating. Our relationship had developed through shared purpose rather than romantic fantasy, built on mutual respect and compatible values rather than spiritual promises or emotional manipulation. The difference between us and what Olivia thought she had with Marcus, Ruby observed, is that we chose each other based on reality rather than projection. We see each other's actual strengths and flaws instead of whatever we want to believe. Bill still bounced his stress ball off my office wall, but the rhythm felt different now. Less anxious, more peaceful. I'd learned something important about the difference between authentic connection and manufactured intimacy. The animation studio had given me a promotion. Half of the foundation's story broke. Apparently, conducting a successful investigation while maintaining my work quality had impressed management. I was now leading a team of junior animators, teaching them the craft while working on projects that actually engaged my creativity. You're different now, Bill observed one afternoon, more focused. Like you figured out something important. He was right. I'd learned that protection requires action, not just intention, that justice emerges through systematic effort rather than righteous anger, that the most effective way to fight manipulation is to expose it to people who have the power and authority to act. Most importantly, I'd discovered that authentic relationships develop through choosing each other repeatedly, day after day, based on who you actually are, rather than who you might become under the right spiritual guidance. Ruby was curled against my shoulder as we watched the sunset from our apartment balcony, her laptop balanced on her knees as she analyzed financial records for another potential fraud case. We'd started working together on investigation projects, combining her analytical skills with my research abilities to help authorities identify and shut down scam operations. I love that we're building something real, she said, looking up from her spreadsheet. Not because some guru told us we were soulmates, but because we choose to be partners in work we care about. I kissed the top of her head, watching the last light fade behind the mountains. Somewhere in the city below, other people were searching for meaning, connection, purpose. Some of them would find authentic answers through genuine spiritual exploration, honest therapy, or simple human connection. Others would encounter Marcus Divine's spiritual descendants, new organizations designed to exploit vulnerability for profit. But now they'd have better warning systems, more public awareness, and authorities who understood the financial patterns that revealed fraud beneath religious rhetoric. The best revenge against spiritual scams isn't personal vindication, it's building a community educated enough to recognize manipulation before it destroys lives. Ruby and I were building that community one investigation at a time, one exposed fraud at a time, one protected victim at a time. And unlike the perfect love Marcus had promised Olivia, what we built together was real. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe to check out more stories on my channel.